back to Pop Culture Popcorn. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marina and this is Nichols, and we like mac and cheese. Regardless of who you are and how you identify, this video is for you, so stick around and keep watching if you want to hear about a pressing issue facing the LGBTQ+ community these days. I know my audience is pretty savvy, but I wanted to make sure that everyone's comfortable with a few terms before we dive in. The term cisgender defines a person whose sense of personal identity corresponds with the sex that they were assigned at birth. The majority of Americans are cisgender like me, but not everybody fits into the same box. There's an enormous spectrum of ways that people identify who they are, and while the spectrum includes gender nonconforming and gender fluid, for the purposes of the conversation we're about to have, we're going to be talking about transgender. So what is transgender? Well, just the opposite of cisgender. Transgender individuals are ones whose sense of personal identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth, and about 1.4 million Americans identify this way. Just for context, that's about the same number of people who live in Philadelphia. Today, I want to talk about one of the many issues that the transgender community faces here in the US. In this country, we have a massive media empire, one where you can get famous off of one YouTube video if enough people watch it. There are so many ways to get your talents out there, whether in film, on TV, a limited series online, or a webcast. However, there is a big problem with our huge media space. The transgender community tends not to get the portrayal it deserves. The cisgender perspective is pretty much the only perspective in mainstream media, portrayed constantly in the public realm, while transgender culture is left on the back burner. Even when transgender stories are told, it's often at the discretion of cisgender producers and directors, meaning that transgender characters tend to act as either comedic relief or a source of pity on screen. In doing some research on why this might be, I talked to a bunch of people who all came to the same conclusion, that much like race and sex, gender and portrayal is all about norms. We don't think about characters, or even people for that matter, as being cisgender. They're just people. We feel the need to name the gender and identify it if it's something other than the norm, and in this case, that norm is cis. I know this might be difficult to admit, but you probably do this too. Have you ever been telling a story and felt the need to express someone's race even if it wasn't at all relevant? It's not necessarily something people do with malintent, but it is something that is so important to notice and take stock of. Unfortunately, inaccurate representations in media can leave many trans people feeling underrepresented and belittled. Transgender characters are just as complex and deserving of honest storylines as any other person in film, so that's what we're going to try and unpack today. Many famous actors such as Eddie Redmayne in The Danish Girl, Jared Leto in Dallas Buyers Club, and Jeffrey Tambor in Transparent are cisgender men playing transgender women on screen. More recently, there have been a couple of really talented transgender actresses cast in transgender roles, most notably Laverne Cox in Orange is the New Black and Daniela Vega in A Fantastic Woman. Cox has received mass popular and critical support for being the first transgender actress to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy in the last 30 years. Vega herself didn't win any awards in the United States, but A Fantastic Woman did receive an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. Have you ever heard of the Wachowski brothers? How about just the Wachowskis? I bet you didn't know that both of these filmmaker siblings transitioned from Andrew and Lawrence to Lily and Lana. These sibs are behind the Netflix show Sense8, whose hacker character is played by a transgender actress named Jamie Clayton. This is a killer example of a trans character who is more than just a token. These casting choices seem to infer that Hollywood might be starting to understand the lack of visibility on the part of trans actors. Maybe, with such critical acclaim, we would stop seeing cross-dressing as a synonym for transgender. However, just as we thought the landscape might be changing, Scarlett Johansson was cast to play Tex, a transgender man and brothel owner in the biopic Rub and Tug. Johansson was met with severe scrutiny for accepting the role of a transgender man, especially since this came almost immediately after her part in Ghost in the Shell, which received its own backlash for whitewashing Asian culture. It seemed like a pretty ill-advised choice on the part of Johansson and Rub and Tug's casting directors. But what we need to talk about is how we, as a society, got to the point where casting directors would even consider choosing a cisgender woman to play a transgender man in the first place. Cate Blanchett, a very well-known actress, represents one perspective on this issue, as she argues for the right to suspend disbelief and play roles beyond her experience. She doesn't believe that you have to have shared experiences in order to play a character well, and that means that a cis actor doing a trans role justice is just as possible as someone acting in a period piece or sci-fi fantasy. In none of these cases do the actors share personal experiences with the characters they're portraying, but nonetheless, these films aren't critiqued in the same way. On the other side, trans actress Tracy Lysette made a point of saying that she wouldn't be upset if she was getting in the same rooms as Jennifer Lawrence or Scarlett for cis roles, but that isn't the case. Essentially, trans actors are only cast as trans characters if they're even cast at all. So ScarJo pulled out of the project, stating that she understood why she might not be the best person for the role and that she was glad there was a larger conversation happening about diversity and representation in film. My question to you is, does it matter? Will it make any formative difference that a prominent actress pulled out of a project in an effort to back the transgender community and attempt to give non-cis artists the equal right to representation in media? This is a much larger conversation about representation in media, and I could have an entire channel dedicated to making videos about portrayals of certain populations in film. You know as well as I do that when we see a character on screen, we should take it with a grain of salt, because that character's backstory has been compiled and created by a group of people who may or may not even understand the character they're bringing to the screen. In the case of trans people on screen, it is exceedingly important that the media gets it right. The transgender community in the US deals with adversity every single day, and it would be awesome to see accurate and genuine portrayals of them in film. I'm not saying that there is no way a cis actor could play a trans character well. We all know that great acting is great acting, and that in the media world, anything is possible. What I am saying is that it might be productive and progressive for the bigwigs in Hollywood to award trans actors the same opportunities as they would cis actors and see what kind of meaningful art can be created when they do. Make sure to subscribe and give this video a big thumbs up before you leave. See you next time on Pop Culture Popcorn.